Um, Hello, everyone. This is Nayiri from Low Carb and Fasting. We have a special guest with us today from Houston, Texas, and he is Dr. Elie Jarrouge.
Got it.
Hello, Dr. Jarrouge. Tell us about your internal medicine doctor. Tell us more about your professional background and where you work now.
Sure. I always wanted to be a doctor. So that was the thing from childhood. So all my childhood, high school, college was just focused on getting into medical school, wanted to help people. So I grew up in Lebanon and moved to the States for undergrad, and then did medical school in Buffalo, New York, and then moved to Houston for residency at the Baylor College of Medicine. And that was 2008, and I finished my training in 2011, and then I did nephrology training or kidney diseases 2011 to 2013. And after that, I decided to work as a hospital medicine doctor. It's called a hospitalist, where I only take care of patients in the hospital. And I've been doing that for 8 years now, from 2013 until now. I still do that. And in the past few years, this is when I started shifting and doing a lot of metabolic health issue, focus treatments. We can talk about that. So that's my professional background.
Yes, so apart from working at a hospital, you also have your own practice where you help patients through a sort of metabolic intervention or a low carbohydrate sort of lifestyle intervention. Tell us about your website and where how you meet up with patients. I think it's all online based, isn't it?
I mean, this all started with my own health, but when I reached a point where I realized this is what needs to happen for most people, and it was the beginning of the pandemic, everybody in lockdown, everybody getting in poor health, gaining weight, I started thinking about, okay, I can't see people, but I want to help. So I started doing remote consultation with patients. And mainly my focus is obesity and diabetes because that's what I care about. And that's the biggest umbrella where you can cover a lot of ground by just focusing on these two things. So I started a website. I started kind of getting active on social media. I was just kind of, baby steps. And, my message was resonating with a lot of people. So people started reaching out. And then it slowly became, a practice what I do remotely, basically. And I coach people through several months of, what to eat, what not to eat, change medication sometimes if they have diabetes, and then really get them on a better trajectory with their health. And that's been very rewarding. And then I started cutting down on the hospital medicine part to give more focus on this thing.
And so what's your website called?
It's called metabolichealthmd.com. So I was lucky to find that nobody had taken it before. So yes, www.metabolichealthmd, all connected.com.
So let's talk about metabolic health. What is metabolic health, and how do you measure your patients' metabolic health?
Sure, it's a broad question. So metabolic health, in my opinion, is when you're basically flexible to use any fuel that is available. But historically and evolutionary, carbohydrates were very limited. So we ran on fat energy. And then when we have carbohydrates in certain seasons, we can always switch fuel to use carbohydrates. So in my opinion, being metabolically healthy is when I can switch fuel with no issue. Now, most people, and there are, studies that show that 88% of people are metabolically unhealthy in the sense that we eat so much of one type of fuel, carbohydrates, that if that goes away, people have a hard time adjusting or using fat for energy. And that's why people are getting more overweight, more obese, more sick. So when you're not metabolically healthy, you have a lot of chronic conditions, whether high blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, kidney disease. There's so many different these chronic diseases in the world we have these days is due to poor metabolic health. Forgot your second question.
So how do you measure metabolic?
Oh, how do I measure? You can spend $0 to measure to figure out if you're metabolically healthy or not, or you can spend hundreds of dollars. My favorite approach is if you have abdominal visceral fat, what we call this, if you the circumference of your waist around your belly button is large, roughly about half your height or more, the chances are you may have poor metabolic health, insulin resistance. We talk about metabolic health and being insulin sensitive. Why? Because fat deposited in the visceral area, which is around your organ, is very toxic and it's not supposed to be there. But the body starts putting it there where it runs out of places, and there's, you need to put the carbohydrate, sugar, other energy form outside of your bloodstream. So it gets deposited in those areas. So if you already have a beer belly, or some people are obese, but some of them are not. Some people are just a little overweight, mostly in the belly, and that area is a sign or reflection or a window into metabolic health. Another way, if you couple that with fasting, for people who don't have type 1 diabetes, if you couple that with insulin level, fasting insulin level, or C-peptide level, which is part of the insulin when it's made in the body, if it's high when you're fasting, that means your body has too much insulin and likely has insulin resistance, where it's not responding. It takes much more insulin to keep things the same way. So these two are my favorite measures of metabolic health. There are others, like the lipid profile. Everybody focuses on LDL, which is, in my opinion, the least important one. But triglyceride and HDL, they go hand in hand with insulin resistance and poor metabolic health. Why? Because when you're in a very rich carbohydrate diet and you have insulin resistance, there's a lot of triglycerides. So glucose gets packaged into these fat molecules called triglycerides, and they're floating around, and you have high triglyceride. That's usually coupled with a low HDL, the good cholesterol. The higher, the better for that one. So high triglyceride, low HDL, high insulin, big circumference. That's more than enough to know that you are in bad metabolic health, whether you know it or not. It's a matter of time where you can get in trouble. Some people get diabetes, some people get high blood pressure, pre-diabetes, or stroke, or whatever, or even not do well if you get an infection, for instance. So there's a lot of bad consequences of that beyond the look.
So it all starts with insulin resistance, basically. So it's important to keep insulin levels low, hence the low carbohydrate diet.
Yeah. And even before insulin resistance, you can have insulin starts rising. So that'd be the early sign. Then you have insulin resistance, so it rises more, but it's not responding. And then you reach a point where, everybody, that's when genetic variability. Some people can gain 10 pounds and reach their fat threshold where they can't get any more fat outside of the belly. They start getting insulin resistance. Some people gain 200 pounds before, that happens with them. So
yes, there is a genetic element there. And if you are skinny, there's something called toffee, right? Thin on the outside and fat on the inside. So if you don't have any visible sort of fat on the outside, doesn't necessarily mean you're metabolically healthy, you're a healthy person, or you're at your optimal health, does it?
And these people tend to have low muscle mass, so you can be skinny because you don't have a lot of muscle, and then you hide. You have the shape, but when you scan, it's a lot of fat and less muscle. And muscle is a very important organ into helping us being insulin sensitive.
Tell us more about sort of importance of protein and importance of exercise and muscle building.
Sure. Again, without muscle, we can move around. Yeah, really, you can't go all days, hunt or found food really survive out without strong muscles. And you only have to look at the elderly and the frail, how, you know, sick they look. So, so it's very important. And muscle use a lot of glycogen, a lot of glucose, and they need that fuel. So when you have to run or do things, you really have to prioritize that. So when you're exercising, when you're building muscle, during that time, your body is prioritizing these fuels to the muscles. So it's not storing it around the organ. It's not, you know, and your body and your muscle is so insulin sensitive that you actually help the body just, you know, take this away from the rest of the body. And when you have the bigger muscles you have, the more storage place you have. Your deep freezer or one of the freezers is like larger, where you can hide a lot of these things. And then so that's very, so stronger, you're more insulin sensitive, and then you're less likely to store this extra carbohydrate energy as fat and just use it for muscle and glycogen.
How do people build muscle? Obviously through exercise, but protein is important, right?
Protein, yes. You mentioned protein. So you need building blocks. So you can't build the wall without the right, you know, having the building blocks to build the wall. So to build muscle, you need protein, and there's many different amino acids, which is the building blocks of protein. And then we need to have them all to have a healthy, structure. But also the body doesn't, if you just eat protein, you don't become stronger by just eating protein. But there's a threshold. If you eat less, yes, you're gonna lose muscle. But if you eat plenty and you don't stress your muscle, you're not gonna grow. It's very expensive on the body to build muscle. So the body doesn't like to do that if it doesn't have to. So if you're sedentary, you're not moving around, you just read on the computer all day long, even if you eat a lot of protein, you can maintain some muscle, but you're not going to build more muscle. So it's very important to stress the muscle. Doesn't mean go run for hours. It means, heavy stuff, whether you do labor or body weight or pick up weights in the gym. So that's how you build muscle, combined with eating protein, and you're better than 90% of people probably.
Resistance training bands,
yes.
They're popular these days with the COVID and most gyms still closed around the world.
Yeah.
I just think
that's my favorite one. I at home, I do push-ups, pull-ups, it's just basic equipment. You don't need expensive equipment or gym memberships, just your body weight.
I do the same. Just use my resistance bands and a couple of weights, small weights. Okay. So you were doing the carnivore, so you were eating in the carnivore way. So your diet was, at one point, at least as far as I know, was mostly based on animal products, so meat, seafood, dairy. You do eat dairy, right? So tell us about the carnivore way of eating, and what are the advantages of it?
You want me to tell you how I got there? How I got here?
How did you get there? Why?
Right. Yeah, I didn't just wake up one day, let me try eating carnivore diet. So in medical school, residency training, just busy with being overwhelmed with training. So you just eat whatever. And being in the US, it's mostly standard American diet, junk food, the muffins, Pop-Tarts, just fast food type nutrition. So I was always thin and fit, but over an 8 to 10 year period, I gained 35 pounds, but didn't gain it overnight. So I didn't notice. I was like, okay, so 2-3 pounds every year. And then it reached a point where I wasn't feeling good. I noticed that my blood pressure started getting higher. That was in my late 20s. So blood pressure going up, starting to, metabolic syndrome where, my HDL was low, my triglycerides started rising. I did not know anything about insulin at that time. But, my waist circumference, my pant size, which is not ideal for that, but I had grown 4 inches of pant size over time. And I started having back pain. And now it's throwing out my back. I would be putting pants on and my back gives out, or I'll be trying to work out at the gym and I get bad spasms and I'll be really miserable for weeks. And that went on for 2 years, thinking I just bad luck. And eventually I started thinking, or, pressure, why don't you look into your food? You don't eat well. Do something about it. I was resistant initially, but then I was miserable. I was like, what do I have to lose? So I started doing paleo type food diet, and there's a program called the Whole 30 program, which basically paleo, but with psychology of food, to avoid sugar, avoid the idea of dessert, just to kind of focus on whole nutrition. And then I did that for a month, and I lost 15 pounds quickly. So, because I'm not predisposed to being obese, it was like so bad, the diet was bad, so I lost a lot of it. And then I did it again, and I lost another 5 pounds. Then I stopped. I was like, okay. And then I started getting worse again.
Tell us more about what exactly did it involve, the paleo diet?
Yeah.
Those of us who are not familiar with it. I'm not personally too familiar with it either.
Yeah, so I'm from the Middle East, so beans and legumes, was part of the diet. So that was a big exchange where I had to eliminate grains and legumes and eat, any vegetables and meat and things like that. So I was eating potatoes and carrots and salads and different meats and fish, and it was really good diet. There was no specifics. I was just eating that. I didn't know. I was just trying. It felt great. I mean, I still think it's a really good way of doing it for somebody who's healthy, just want to maintain health. A paleo type diet is good. It's not very low in carb because you can eat a lot of root vegetables and things like that. So if you have diabetes, let's say, you may want to reverse that first before you can overdo it with
that's ideal.
potatoes.
And fruit as well, right? I mean,
fruit technically are paleo, but you have to be careful. Not, you can easily overdo that. So again, if you have diabetes and you eat grapes, you'll know that your sugar is going to rise. But if you're otherwise fine and you want to include some fruit, it was okay. But the idea was, as Whole 30 is like, don't eat something just because you want a dessert, you want something sweet. Although it could be paleo, but if you're using it as dessert, then you have you have bad habits. You're working on addictive behavior, right? Even if it's healthy food. So that was a difference. After paleo, I started reading nutrition. This is when I started getting to discover Jason Fung after that, and Gary Taubes, and I started reading Obesity Code, How We Get Fat, and I was really started listening to podcasts and discovering this world. And then when I learned about keto, was my next phase of, okay, I want to try keto, because I got interested in self-experimentation. So in 2018, at that point, I had lost 25 pounds. I didn't think I had more weight to lose. I looked fine.
Did your back pain get better?
My back pain disappeared, or 80% of it disappeared. I was just, aches and pains here and there, but for the most part, didn't have flare-ups anymore. I was active again. I felt good. When I forget about my back, that means I'm good. So I haven't thought about it. And then did keto for 3 months straight. Hardcore, like the traditional way, very high fat, moderate protein, very low carbohydrates, was testing my ketones. I felt amazing. And then I lost like another those 5 pounds or 10 pounds left. I was like, oh, so there is more. And I felt the best. And in transition, I started having issues with the keto diet, where I was having a rash. It's called the keto rash. I would get it on my neck, my chest, very itchy. Couldn't figure it out. Then somebody told me at a conference that I might not be eating enough protein. I thought about it. It's true, because when you're naive and first starting keto, all you do is like fat. So it's good. I mean, it keeps your glucose flat, and some people need a lot of fat because they can't hold on to weight. Carbs are very low, but I don't know what it is. I still can't explain. But when I upped my protein intake and lowered my fat intake a little bit, I'm still on ketosis because my carbs are low and ketones are positive. The rash went away, and I even got leaner than before. So this is when I transitioned to animal-based and I got interested in carnivore. So I did carnivore. I did like almost 100% carnivore for a few months, just, out of curiosity. Felt the best, even if my weight hasn't changed, because I already reached like probably optimal, but my body coupled with strength training. So I loved it, and my gut felt the best, because a lot of people, I love vegetables, but some vegetables, mess me up. So bloating, cramping, things like that, even if it's not legumes. So this is how I did it. And then these days I'm mostly like maybe 80 to 90% carnivore. Whenever I'm home, I'm most likely carnivore with occasional pickles or some avocado or tomatoes, something like that, just for added flavor. When I go out, I'm a little bit more forgiving, because I'm already in good state. So I can, sushi, I like some, eat that. So I can do that. So this is how I ended up mostly carnivore for my own, because this seems to work for me the best.
Did you ever wear a CGM to monitor your blood sugar?
I personally did not, but I have clients even who are not diabetic wear it because they're interested in data. Or if they're like, we know they're insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, so they can see things. So I'm learning from them. I personally, I know, it's like, I can put it on, obviously, but I just try not to be too obsessive with my approach with my own health. But I do think everybody who's starting on their journey, a CGM can be eye-opening in terms of the kind of food we think are healthy and how they, affect your glucose.
Yeah, even if someone wears it for 15 days or for 1 month, I think the dates.
Yeah, it's very insightful, very insightful. So yeah, I mean, the glucose, some people like, they want a flat line. We're not, it's more about the general curve. So it's more about your general idea. So eating a meal, having a little bit of blip and coming back down, that's healthy. That's, insulin is important. We're not saying insulin is bad for you. Insulin is actually, you can't live without insulin. It's just that too much of a good thing, you develop resistance, and then it's working overdrive, and then there's a lot of issues that happen with it. So having a blip is fine, but having the whole curve always rising, always high, that's a bigger problem.
So you did mention earlier on that most of your patients are either overweight and have blood pressure problems, or they're diabetic, and we're talking about type 2 diabetes here. But
Yes.
But who else is the low carbohydrate lifestyle suitable for? Is it suitable for anyone if they want to get healthier?
I personally believe that anybody will benefit being, except maybe some genetic diseases that I'm not aware of, but there are certain genetic kind of diseases we can't eat, and it's very rare. But for the majority of the population, a low carbohydrate diet is probably the ideal diet. And it's especially if you have any issues with your health, chances are it's going to improve it. Why? Because, people join for weight loss or diabetes, but when you take the history, you always often find headaches, chronic headaches, migraines, acid reflux, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. People have skin condition, allergies, nothing specific, anxiety, depression, just you name it. And then while we're not focusing on these things, we realize after a few months of eating healthier, yes, you're losing weight, but everything else gets better. I did a group coaching once, and then these people, like one of them was depressed all her life, always anxious. After 2-3 months, she forgot what that meant, like completely disappeared. Migraines disappeared, acid reflux disappeared. High blood pressure, although it's slower to go away, it does go away. And then, and people were just coming off medication. So yes, is it a magic pill? Does it sound like voodoo? It does sound crazy, but my experience with most people, if it's a condition, chronic metabolic condition, which is by default a dietary problem, not a shortage of pills, then undoing that will only help it. So I think everybody should try it if they're not happy with their health. If you're happy, you're thin, you want to eat your carbs, enjoy it.
Can it be used as a preventative sort of measure? So someone doesn't, maybe someone has, someone is still in their 20s, they have type 2 diabetes in the family, but they're not yet diagnosed.
Right.
They feel healthy, they feel happy. Can they adopt this lifestyle to prevent it happening? Because mom is type 2 diabetic, dad is type 2 diabetic. Obviously, they are predisposed to also become diabetic. So could it be used as a preventive measure?
Absolutely. I think it should be. I mean, the whole point, it's easier to never have the disease and try to fix it afterwards. So remember, when you have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or high blood pressure or cardiovascular disease, something is broken. So your metabolism is broken. You can undo a lot of it, but some people, you can never fix it back to 100%, but you can get as close as possible. Why struggle for months and years to reverse years of bad damage versus preventing it from happening? So if you have a strong family history of diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, or any of that stuff, you are at increased risk. But it doesn't mean you're going to have it unless you follow the same lifestyle that your family has. So you can always start and then eat healthy. I mean, there's nothing by healthy, that means boring. You can eat, just don't stop eating junk food, right? I used to run between classes eating Pop-Tarts and muffins and chips and chocolate and juices. That was my food. This is not food. This is sugar and carbohydrates and oils and just really no nutrition there.
Food-like substance.
Yeah, food-like substances. It tastes good. It hacks your brain. It really makes you feel good. It gives you a quick jolt, but you're not healthy. You're actually in worse health every single meal. So yes, you can choose eggs over cereal, fish, meat, eggs, whatever over, buns and just carbohydrates and chips and things like that. So just you can make small changes, still eat delicious food and not be hungry all the time and chasing your tail with the sugar roller coasters.
Yes, I think this is also a good sort of way of eating to fight hunger, because you don't fight hunger with it. I mean, I could go on 48 hours without eating, without feeling hungry. I mean, I would eat if I feel hungry, but I can just go on. I don't feel.
I mean, my colleagues are all surprised. They look at me like, "You don't eat." I was like, I don't hungry. Plus, I'm not hungry. Plus, I don't want to eat anything crappy. So if I'm a little hungry, but I can wait, I'm not gonna crash. I don't get hangry. So people don't know, because when I was carb dependent, if you get hungry, you quickly go from hunger to hanger, which is angry and hungry and irritable. So we all understand that feeling. But when you adapt after a while, which is the hardest part about this lifestyle, is getting there after allowing your body for a few weeks to adapt. But once you adapt it, I mean, you can go a long time and be fine, and you can be hungry and not crash. You can just make it until the next meal. And that's the beauty. It's a superpower when you're not a slave to the food.
And it's so liberating,
Exactly.
People constantly think of food, and you're fine. You're not even hungry, and people do wonder though, don't they? They ask you why you're not eating. I usually tell.
They think it's willpower. They think it's mental illness. They think it's disorders with like food. But I think they're all projecting, because a lot of them, they can't live without the carbohydrates. They want that treat, stress, hunger. That cookie, that whatever, bag of chips makes them feel temporarily better. But I think everybody knows that they're not eating healthy by doing that. But they don't have a solution right that moment, because they're stuck in that vicious cycle. So you have to break it. You have to plan ahead until you go detox from the carbohydrates, to replace it with good fats and protein, and really become metabolically more flexible, so you can go between fat and carb. And by fat doesn't mean you have to be eating fat, because if you're not eating, you're still using energy, but that you can be using your own body fat for energy. So
you did mention nephrology earlier on, and kidney sort of specialism. do people's kidneys get better if people are suffering from poor state of kidney health? And also, a lot of people are terrified of protein because they have that myth ingrained in them that protein will damage their kidneys. Why don't you clarify that for us?
Yeah, I don't know where this myth started, but so let me start by this. The cause of kidney failure ending up with dialysis is diabetes. So 50% of people, give or take, of people on dialysis got there because of diabetes. That's huge. So what's killing the kidneys is not protein, is sugars, carbohydrate, insulin resistance, things like that. Because it's a microvascular, so these small vessels in the kidneys get so damaged, and the kidney gets leaky and protein leak, and eventually scars to the point of no return. Now, once you're end-stage kidney disease, your kidneys can't function, then being careful with how much protein you eat is important. But before that, before dialysis, when it's stage 1, 2, 3 kidney disease, really there is no harm, there's no evidence, and there's actually, I forgot, I read something recently, there are evidence that even like early stages chronic kidney diseases, when you go low carb, fix your metabolic health, that improves because it's not yet scarred. Think of it like fatty liver disease before it gets to cirrhosis. If you have cirrhosis, too late because you're scarred. But if you have fatty liver, it's not scarred yet, you can reverse that with diet, and the liver function improves. So same thing with the kidneys. So protein do not harm the kidneys. When you have an end-stage kidney disease, it's not like they harm, it's just the body can't handle, the kidneys they're not there to handle the protein load, and that's why it becomes problematic only on that exceptional population. But for most people, there's absolutely no harm. It's actually benefit to be on a high protein, low carbohydrate diet.
And I think higher protein by default also means lower carbohydrate, because because protein is more satiating, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And most people, by higher protein, I mean, I don't know what they imagine, but most people are not eating enough protein. They're eating very low protein, and the advice how much protein should be eaten by dietitian, nutritionists. This is the minimum. It's not even like the optimal range. So if you're eating that, you're like doing the bare minimum. So, and my gauge tell people, if you're still hungry, you're not lasting from meal to meal, you're not eating enough protein. So you don't have to measure if you don't want to measure. Just eat enough so you're not eating constantly.
Where does fasting come into this? Is it helpful? Is it beneficial? I mean, we're called Low Carb and Fasting. So I do fasting personally. I've been actually doing intermittent fasting for 21 years, possibly.
Yeah, you've been doing that for a while. Fasting is the greatest tool of all. And it really doesn't matter what diet you believe in or you want to follow. You can be on the standard American diet and add fasting and benefit. So you can be vegan and you can be carnivore, you can be any lifestyle you want. Fasting is what really gives your body a break. Because when you're not eating, your body is still using energy. It's not going to stop. So you burn off whatever excess carbohydrate stored, and then you go into the fat storage that does not belong in those places. So it makes your insulin drop. So it is healthy. So the longer the period of fasting, the better. So I use intermittent fasting. I recommend intermittent fasting for everybody. The caveat, when people start on any lifestyle, going from standard American diet to try to fast right away, they crash because they're not adapted. So the body, when you deplete the carbs, the body doesn't know how to use fat. So then they crash, they get hungry, they crave things, they start eating things. So it's important to do it smart and then adapt, eat more protein and slowly ease into fasting. But it's doable with any diet. It reverses a lot of things, and it's free.
And it's free, completely free. And
saves you money too, because you eat less often, less frequent.
Which is actually important, because a lot of people complain that, oh, keto is, expensive. But if you take periods of fasting into account, you're not constantly eating. You're having one meal a day, or one meal or two meals per 2
Right.
days.
And I had people tell me that in my group coaching, they were concerned that eating healthy is going to be expensive. I told them, yeah, per meal it's going to be expensive, but once you adapt and adjust, it may be the same or even better. And after a few months, they told me that they were spending less on food. They're not buying snacks, they're not buying sodas, they're not buying anything. The pantry is just limited with whatever, and then just real food, eggs and fish. You don't have to eat ribeye steaks to be healthy. I mean, eggs is cheap, tuna, sardines, ground beef, any chicken. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just buy whatever you can afford, eat enough of it so you're not eating the other junk. And then over time, things will, you'll find out that you're actually not spending more.
Dr. Jarrouge, you mentioned your background. You were born in Lebanon. Yes. And that's where I grew up. I spent part of my childhood in Lebanon as well. So it's very close to my heart. But not only Lebanon, but also generally the Middle East. Now, we've been hearing about the Middle East recently, quite a lot actually, in a lot of medical conferences. I've been hearing about Middle East having, being, I think the world's in the top 3 or top number 1 in rates of type 2 diabetes. So why is insulin resistance so prevalent, in your opinion, in the Middle East?
I think it's the same reason it's so prevalent here. I think what happened in the past 20 years or so, when I left Lebanon 20 plus years ago, obesity was not high. You don't see that.
No.
I go back now and I see everybody is overweight, and kids, which is a sad thing. We used to have 1 or 2 classmates who are on the chubby side, but now you see a huge 20-30% of kids are obese, and the genes didn't change. It's not like they're genetic. What changed is the food. So as we moved away from traditional foods. We used to eat raw liver, used to be breakfast time, or eggs and things like that. Now it's all cereal and the Western style thing. So I think a lot of it is the invasion of the processed food, the convenience, people going to the workforce, both parents a lot of times are working, so they just want convenient things, plus economic problems. So meat tends to be more expensive. They're buying whatever is subsidized wheat and things like that. I mean, I grew up eating bread and desserts and everything like that, but there was no McDonald's. There's no fast food as much. Yes, we ate fast food style food at home, but for the most part we're still like home cooked meals. Yes. Focus on that. Now it's just ultra processed junk food that is highly palatable and addictive, and that's one. 2, kids and adults are less active. I'm not saying activity makes you lose weight, but at least it will keep you busy and less likely to eat other things. And we're not athletic anymore. We used to be in sports, but in the Middle East I see a lot of kids just playing video games. Yes. And then moving away from the traditional food. So as I mentioned, so that is skyrocketing. So they definitely have genetic predisposition, because the rate is scary. And that goes along with the obesity, because obesity is skyrocketing and it's insulin resistance. So this is all the same thing: obesity, insulin resistance, diabetes. We're going to see more heart disease. We're going to see all this cancer. All these things are going to increase if they're not already increasing. I didn't look at the data. So
yeah. I think there's another problem, another aspect of the problem with the Middle East is that people tend to normalize. I mean, if you're in your 40s and you're taking blood pressure medication, that's pretty normal. Or, they normalize, they seem to, or it comes across to me like that because I'm so health conscious. But I just talk to people and they seem to normalize weight gain. Okay, well, you've had 2 babies, so of course you're going to be, chubbier now. Why?
The metabolism slow down with age, or they make excuses for themselves. They don't know that, but they are, and yeah, they attack the healthy because, well, it's easy for you to say because you've always been thin. They don't know how much work put into it. Or, oh, you don't have kids, so you don't understand, things like that. So unfortunately, yeah, that's, and they love, I don't know why, but I know in Lebanon, they always like, they want something they want quick fixes. What can I take to lose weight? What can I take to do this? What can I take? And I tell them, there's nothing you can take. You need to stop what's causing it. Oh no, I can't stop. I need my bread and sugar. And I was like, I mean, you can have it, but you're not gonna get healthier. So
there is no magic pill.
Yeah, there's no magic pill. Well, the magic pill is low carbohydrates, and there's a balance. You can get to a point where you can enjoy these things. It's not like you're gonna die if you ate, cake sometime, or have potatoes, things like. I have them, so I'm not a hypocrite. I understand, but I worked on my body to a point where I'm very flexible, very insulin sensitive, lean. So I make up for it. Like if I know I'm gonna indulge a certain day, there's always multiple tools. Other days, fasting, cleaner diet for a longer time, more high intensity exercise. There's a lot of things you can do to mitigate one bad day or even bad week. You can always get back on track.
Well, I'm type 1 diabetic. I fast, and I eat under 20 grams. That's total grams of carbs per day. If that, most of the time, I try. It's not like I restrict myself. I try, but carbs just don't add up because my diet is based on eggs and fish and that sort of thing. So, but can type 1s do fasting and exercise and do it safely? And also they can do. I know they can, but please, we need a confirmation from you if type 1s also can fast and do keto.
I just want to say first, like whatever I'm saying is more, opinion, and I'm not giving specific medical advice to anybody. Type 1 diabetes is controversial in the medical community to be low carb for one simple reason, that is a misunderstanding what ketosis is versus ketoacidosis. So type 1 diabetics are prone to develop something called DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. It's a life-threatening condition. You can end up in the hospital. You can die from it. I've treated many of them, but that's a condition where, so your body doesn't make insulin as type 1 diabetic, but you eat bad, so your glucose running wild, and there's no insulin to shove inside the cells, and then you're starved inside the cell, so you start breaking down fat and have high glucose, or very high, very low insulin, and then you have that ketoacidosis is a very high level of acid level in the blood, and then when the pH acid level drops, which is more acid, you can shut down organs, damage cells, a lot of things, and it's a very deadly condition. That's different than ketosis. Ketosis is simply a state where you're using fat for fuel, and you have ketones as a byproduct, which you can also use as fuel for your brain, for your heart muscle. Completely different processes. So
different things,
understanding that. And so if you have type 1 diabetes, you just have to be a little bit more careful, because you will always require insulin. Insulin is vital, but needing 15, 20 units of insulin a day is different than eating bad and needing 200 units of insulin a day. So this is where intermittent fasting, low carbohydrates, you're no different than any other person, except your insulin, instead of you making it and secreting it, you need to give it to yourself. So the idea is you're not going to go zero insulin, but you're going to be very insulin sensitive, or you only need, I don't know, Nayiri, how many units of insulin do you use a day?
It was 10 units yesterday, and I was so pleased with myself for the whole day.
It's amazing. 10 units, some diabetics use that with like a snack. They take 10 units of insulin. So you're taking, I assume, basal insulin, so because you're not eating carbs. So you just need basal level of insulin for body functions. Insulin is vital. So don't misunderstand me. You need insulin, but too much insulin is the problem. So yes, as a type 1 diabetic, you can improve your lifestyle. You should do it with a doctor's supervision, because it's going to require changing the dose of your insulin, because if you can die if you drop two. So if you, let's say you're type 1 diabetic, you used to be on 50 units of insulin, all of a sudden you're excited, you're doing intermittent fasting and low carb, and your glucose crashes, you didn't adjust your insulin, you can go into a coma and die from very low glucose level. So in the short term, the low number are more dangerous. So it's very important to do it with doctor supervision, because it takes a transition. You may have to tolerate higher numbers until you figure it out. And if it's slow, you do have to take sugar as an emergency. So it's a completely different game. But once you get to you, somebody who's experienced, you can live your life on low carb, intermittent fasting, and require very little. Because you can be type 1 and develop insulin resistance. So if you're type 1 and you're overweight, you already develop type 2 over on top of type 1, if that makes any sense. Like you became insulin resistant.
And then
and then
so I had
insulin to have the same effect. Yeah, so you use like a double whammy. You don't make insulin, but you're also insulin resistant. That's the worst combination. And type 1 people, type 1 diabetes, they go blind, they lose limbs. I mean, because you get them at a younger age, so you have longer time of damage. But you can live a healthy life with minimal insulin.
Yeah, it's possible. Okay, well,
You're doing it. Yeah.
I'm doing it. And I was supposed, after 43 years of being type 1, I was expected to have some kind of damage, either retinopathy or neuropathy or both, and a number of other things, but I have none of them. So I'm doing okay.
That's awesome. I'm so happy for you.
It was a fascinating talk. I really appreciated your time. And hopefully we'll do it again in the future and change the topics a little bit. And I'd love to chat with you again.
Of course. Good luck with the channel.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Have a good day. Bye for now. Bye-bye.